Hi again, hand readers. I'm Jennifer. I'm here to support you in the study and practice of hand reading. It's such a compassionate and tender and healing craft. And I've been at it for 30 years. And today's topic is all about the loops on the thumbs, the loop dermatoglyphic. And last week I spoke about arches, and this week we're going to jump into the next in the tier of the 5-element system of how to interpret dermatoglyphics, which is the loop. In the 5-element system of hand reading, each dermatoglyphic, or glyph as I call it for short, is ascribed a rulership or governorship of an element. In this video, which I posted some months back, I explained a little bit more in depth about the 5-element system. You might want to pop in there and have a listen to how this principle of graduated materiality pervades through all of 5-element chirology. But after arches, which are governed by earth, we come to loops, which is again today's topic. Loops are governed by water, and the interpretation of loops and thumbs, many of them can also be applied to the respective individual digits, but they will be modified by what that individual digit represents. So each finger has what we call an identity. They're known as the 5 identities, and the identity of our thumbs is the spiritual identity. It's governed by chi, which is really the 5th element, the element of all that is intangible, all that is invisible, and that represents highest consciousness and spirituality. And the various markings and features of thumbs, as I've been explaining for several weeks now, really do refer to the strength or weakness of a person's thumb. So it can kind of make or break the person's character. Last week I said an arch strengthens the thumb. The loop being more linked to the water element, which is adaptable and flexible and go with the flow. This is going to, in a certain sense, weaken the thumb, but there's always the positive side. Our thumb tips are fire governed, and they represent how we express ourselves in the world, how we do things, our volition, our will, our determination. So it's the application of that level of determination that is represented by the tip of our thumb. And the glyph shows our psychological predisposition underlying that expression of the will. Immediately we understand then that those of us with loops on our thumbs are going to express traits of sensitivity. It goes with water, of course, water being very sensitive. This is a scientific fact. It's one of the principles of water, emotional, flexible, and of course, as I've said before, there's like almost a dictionary of various terminologies that go with each element. And there are quite scientific principles. So this is what makes the 5-element system so easy to grasp. How we take what we know in terms of what the elements, how they behave, what they exhibit, and then we map those characteristics onto the person. And then to take the 5-element system into let's say, a deeper level or a broader perspective, we are also able to take each individual marking and subclassify that into the order of earth to water to fire to air to chi. And that gives us the opportunity to look at, respectively, the person's physical life, emotional life, vocational life, mental life, and spiritual life. So it's a wonderful context, a wonderful sort of safety net for working with your clients, especially if you, as I am, if you're into the kind of counseling and coaching area of hand reading. This is where I feel our hand reading work has the most impact, when we work within this counseling and coaching model known as the 5 realms, which I always emphasize. That being, again, the physical, emotional, vocational, mental, and spiritual. And those, again, subclassify even further into very specific areas of human experience. So working with the loop on people's thumbs, or if you've got loops on your own thumbs, then perhaps the conversation in the context of a hand reading might be around family matters, it might be around health. In the emotional level, it would be about specifically more towards relationships, because of course it's all about adaptability and how those of us with loops always try to fit in. So there could be a conversation about boundaries, for example. On the fire level, the conversation or the counseling and coaching theme would be around the person's vocational life, their life purpose. I like to think of it as the sacred bundle, what it is we offer to the world, what's in our toolkit. There are all sorts of ways we can approach this. And here the conversation might be about the person's discipline and their will, because water, people with those of us with loops on our thumb tips, tend to do things only when we really feel like it. So the problem might be in harnessing our discipline, and we're so concerned with being in the flow, we're so sensitized to our own emotional state, that and wanting to accommodate ourselves and of course others as well, but that it might be that much harder to assert and to harness that discipline for ourselves. And then in a corporate environment, for example, a person might struggle with being a team worker as opposed to a leader. People with loops are better at teamwork than they are at leadership, for the most part. Of course, everything is always offset by so many other factors, including the thumb alone. If a person has particularly stiff thumb and they have a loop on the tip, there'll be a whole modification of the meaning. So what I'm endeavoring to do in these little tutorials is just to offer some basic ideas. So from these fundamentals, you can sort of mix and match and come to your own conclusions. On the mental level, because, as I was taught many years ago, those of us with loops are more process-orientated than outcome-orientated, again, the conversation, for example, might be around the theme of discipline and application and aligning and sticking to a task at hand. On a personal note, which is rather hard for me because I am very introvert by nature, it's very difficult for me to harness the discipline to present these weekly YouTube videos. Often I don't feel like it. Today I really feel like it, though. It's quite amazing how much my energies and circumstances determine what kind of mood I'm in. So I'm just using myself as an example of how the theme for people with loops on thumbs could very well be around how to show up. And then spiritually, those of us with loops, for example, might be more flexible again than those with arches. People with arches are going to likely pray in very conservative and traditional ways, whereas those with loops might pray in ways, or when I say pray, have a spiritual orientation or not. Some people don't have a particular, they might be agnostic or atheist, or be very aligned, for example, with, say, self-development training courses and so on, which is another kind of way to develop oneself without actually aligning with a traditional religion per se. But generally, you could say people with loops would probably aspire more to spirituality than to conformist religion. Just to touch for a moment now on the radial versus the ulnar loop. The loop that I've been referring to is what's known as an ulnar loop. In other words, the opening of the loop on the thumb comes in from the baby finger side of the hand, the ulnar side of the hand, ties into the ulnar bone. So the radial side of the hand is the thumb side, references the radius, this bone of the hand. So a loop that's flowing in from the baby finger side is an ulnar loop, and a radial loop, which is extremely unusual on a thumb. When I wrote my book, God-Given Glyphs, which is all about fingerprints, I struggled to find samples of radial loops on thumbs. I think I found about 3 out of thousands of handprints. So a radial loop on a thumb doesn't have very easily identifiable meanings, but because radial loops enter from the thumb side, the outer side of the hand, we could suggest that the person, because it's so rare, we could say the person must be unusual in some way. The marking is so uncommon, and it could be, again, linked into their spirituality, because loops bring the flexibility, the opening to the outer world of the radial formation of a loop exhibits a certain sort of openness to the world, so it could be the person won't have prejudice, they won't be bigoted, they might break away and choose unorthodox ways to pray, they might be rather rebellious individualists. These are just possible ideas that one could apply to the very unusual manifestation of a radial loop on a thumb. In next week's video, I'll be touching on tented arches, which are almost non-existent on thumbs, and which are fire-governed, and then the big conversation about the whirl on the thumb. And please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and thanks so much for listening and watching. See you next week.